Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Welcome to our course Cross-Cultural Communication. Our today's topic is theoretical perspective of cross-cultural communication. Al- Although there are different theories for cross-cultural communication that are presented by Edward D. Hall or Richard D. Lewis, Geert Hofstede, and Fons Trompenaars. Clifford Geertz also has contributed to this field. But anyhow, the theory that I have discussed, the symbolic theory that is presented by George Herbert Mead, is a theory of symbolic interactionist theory. So George Herbert Mead was a philosophy professor at the University of Chicago for the first three decades of the 20th century. As a close personal friend of renowned pragmatist John Dewey, you have heard the name of this great pragmatist, John Dewey, he shared Dewey's applied approach to knowledge. Although George Herbert Mead taught in a philosophy department, he is best known by sociologists as a teacher who trained a generation of the best minds in their field. Strangely, he never set forth his wide-ranging ideas in a book or systematic treatise. The book the name of the book Mind, Self and Society, that we will discuss in our today's lecture, in our today's theory, it was not written by George Herbert Mead. It was written by his student, although the ideas were presented by Mead, but the book and the notion that were presented in this theory, that was because of his student Bloomer, Herbert Bloomer. So strangely, he never set forth his wide-ranging ideas in a book or systematic treatise. After he died in 1931, his students, different students, pulled together class notes and conversations with their mentor and published this book, Mind, Self and Society, in his name, with the name of their teacher. So it was the only then that his chief disciple or his chief students, Herbert Bloomer at the University of California, Berkeley, coined the term symbolic interactionism. So he didn't use the term symbolic interactionism, although the basis, the foundation which are provided to this theory, it was the foundation were presented by the George Herbert Mead, but the name was given by his students, symbolic interaction. We believe that our thoughts, self-concept, and wider community we live in are created through communication, symbolic interaction. Symbolic interactions theory is a micro-level theory that focuses on the relationship among individuals within a society. Communication, the exchange of meaning through language and symbols. These three different things: meaning, language, and symbols is believed to be the way in which people make senses of their social words. People try to understand, people use the language, people interact with other people, and they make their meanings or clear and interpret those meanings, and then they deal with their social life or their social words. The ongoing use of the language and gestures in anticipation of how others will react a conversation. Bloomer stated that there are three core principles of symbolic interactionism that deal with meaning, language, and thinking. Or these three principles led to conclusions about the creation of a person's self and socialization into the larger society. Number one, these three principles, meaning, language, and thinking. Number one is their meaning. So let's talk about meaning, the construction of social reality, in what way people interact with other people. The number one is their meaning, interpretation, explanation of the things as a result of their interaction with other people. Bloomberg states that humans act towards people or things on the basis of the meanings they assign to those people or things. It's our interpretation that counts. So what sort of meaning speaker or hearer give to the interaction, it matters a lot. Mead claimed that is the most human and humanizing activity that people can engage in talking to each other. This claim provides the background for the movie Nell. This is a movie that was based on this meaning, or in the principle of the meaning, as in this theory we will discuss. So let's see what is in this movie of Nell. The story of Nell. Jodie Foster received the Best Actress Oscar nomination for her 1994 portrayal of a backwoods young woman raised in almost total isolation. The film Nell covers a 3 month period of the woman's life immediately following the death of her mother. Nell is discovered by Jerry Lowell, a small town doctor, Dr. Jerry, and who is quickly joined by Paula Olsen, who was a psychologist from a big city university medical center. So Dr. Jerry and Mr. Paula, they will both deal to this young woman, Nell. Both are shocked and fascinated by this grown-up wild child. They say it's a wild child because she couldn't speak in a proper way. She uttered some words that were not easily understandable by the hearers, and sometimes on the basis of those words they believe and they consider that the child has some mental problem, and she is not a normal child or normal young woman. And most of the time she trembles in terror and makes incomprehensible sounds, incomprehensible speech that the surrounding people who are in the surrounding, they couldn't understand what sort of speaking, what sort of language she was using. The girl Nell. Nell is based on the play Idioglossia, a Greek term meaning a personal or private language. Idioglossia means personal or private language. Dr. Jerry and Mr. Paula come to realize Nell's speech is not gibberish. It means it's not a what we say gibberish mean that is not understandable. It has meaning. The words are spoken by Nell. These are having some sort of understanding. Her language is based on the King James Version of the Bible, which her mother read to her out loud for more than 20 years. Yet, because the mother had suffered a stroke that left one side of her face paralyzed, the words Nell learned from unintelligible to anyone else. So, because her mother used to recite the Bible and her mother couldn't recite the Bible in appropriate way because her face, one-sided face was paralyzed. So she could recite in a different wording. Early in the film, Paula labels Nell autistic. There is a problem having with speech. And tries to have her committed to a psych ward for observation. Jerry, on the other hand, treats Nell as a frightened human being and tries to get to know her by learning her language. There is another example in James Wagner's One Woman play, The Search for Signs of Intelligent Life in the Universe. Trudy the Bag Lady. Here is another story. Trudy the Bag Lady. Oh, when we utter this word bag lady, what do you understand by this bag lady? What could be the bag lady? So if we are in the class and there is a face-to-face lecture over there, so we will do an activity or we will start thinking about this bag lady. Anyhow, continue our lecture. So bag lady, think about this bag lady. What could be? View society from her perspective on the street. Her words highlight the interactionist position that meaning making is community project. By when we make our meanings, these meanings are given us by the society, by the community. What she says in a poem, Trudy, the bag lady says, it's my belief we all, at one time or another, secretly ask ourselves the question, am I crazy? In my case, the answer came back a resounding yes, because that Trudy, the bag lady, because she used to roam in the street, and according to other people or community members, they thought that she is a crazy, and maybe she heard uh, 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 from other people by saying her, or uh, by this declaration she understood that they really she is a crazy, because she said, she asked about herself, am I crazy? In my case, the answer came back sounding, yes, I'm crazy. So people gave interpretation about her that she is a crazy, so that's why she admitting, really, I'm a crazy. Here I have put some pictures about bag lady, or maybe you have thought about this term bag lady. Bag lady could be here in this way, like in Western countries, or beggar, or maybe a very poor lady, or maybe some sort of things you can relate with this bag lady. It's your interpretation, it's your own meanings that you will give to this word bag lady. According to Mead, once people define a situation as real, it's very real in its consequences. It's related to thinking of the people, or giving the interpretation or meaning of the people to that particular event or that particular situation. And with possible exception, here we can say Dr. Jerry, all of the other people in the story initially regard Nell as totally other than themselves, that they are normal persons, and the Nell, the wild child who said that she was not a normal child, except Dr. Jerry, who understood the situation very well, and he knew the circumstances and all of the related things, and came to know that the Nell was not a wild child. In the circumstances in which she was brought up, because of those circumstances, she was a changed person, and but the other people think that she's very odd, and she must be explored or exploited, or she must be treated badly, or she must be behaved nicely in this way. What causes people to react this way towards Trudy or Nell? Trudy the bag lady, or Nell the wild child? What are the reasons why people think or react in this way towards those people? For followers of the beast, that's a loaded question, one that reflects the stimulus response thinking of behavioral scientists. What sort of stimulus? And they give response. But interactions in behavioral sciences, what we say, the behavior is learned on the basis of stimulus response, whereas in interactionist, it's this model becomes on the other way. Interactions are united in the disdain of deterministic thinking. The closest they come to the idea of the causality is to urge that humans act on their definition of the situation. So this model of interactionist is different from the behavioral sciences. In behavioral sciences, there is a model of behaviorism theory, stimulus, then response, then behavior. Here we can see there is a change in this model: stimulus, then interpretation, that's called meaning. Stimulus, interpretation, then response. The middle term, the meanings, it shows that the meanings matters a lot. However, those interpretations or meanings are shared throughout the society, and sometimes they it seems to other people that it's very difficult to resist those meanings or interpretation. They have to understand in that way, in which way the other society is giving those interpretations. Second principle of symbolic interaction theory is language. Bloomers' second premise is that the meaning arises out of the social interaction. When meanings are arises when people interact with other people, and in other words, what we can say, meaning is not inherent in objects. We cannot say that the meanings are hidden in the objects. It is not pre-existent in a state of nature. It's not pre-existed. When people will interact with other people, then meaning will be taken out from as a result of their interaction. So meaning is negotiated through the use of language. If there is no language, no meaning will be taken out from the interaction, because there is no result of interaction. What we can say, there is no consequences of the interaction. It's the only the language that we can say that meanings are interpreted by the use of language. As human beings, we have the ability to name things. We can designate a specific object, person, identify an action, or refer to an abstract idea. Occasionally, a word sounds like the thing it describes, but usually the names we use have no logical connections with the object at hand. Symbols are arbitrary signs, means there is no connection between the names and the symbols. There is nothing inherently small, soft, or lovable in the word kitten. It's only by talking with other people, symbolic interaction, that we come to ascribe that meaning and develop a universe of discourse. So, but we can say we, being a human being, give them names to the things, to the objects, and to the symbols. We believe that symbolic naming is the basis for human society. The book of Genesis in the Bible states that Adam's first task was to name the animals, the dawn of civilization, as we also have heard in our Holy Quran, and we have also, well, we can also observe in the first para, وَأَلَّمَ الْآدَمَ الْأَسْمَاءَ. So we can see, first of all, Adam was taught by the names of the things, not names of the animals. Here we can see in the Bibles, Adam was taught the name of the animals. But in our Holy Quran, Adam was taught the name of the things, the dawn of the civilization. So naming the things, or symbolic naming, is the basis for human society, for human action, interaction. Interactionists claim that the extent of knowing is dependent on the extent of naming. So, although language can be prison that confine us, we have the potential to push back the walls and the bars as we master more words. So, language, what we can say, we dependent on the language to interact with other people, and we can go and we can sometimes we give different things to different names or different objects. So language is our assistive, or it becomes our helper to give the names of the things and to give the interpretation and meanings of the things. The interactionist or theorist of symbolic interaction theory, they claim that human intelligence is the ability. It means human has this ability to make the things symbolically identification, make the things or to identify the things symbolically, and it depends upon how much we encounter the things. In that way, we can identify the things. Here, see the examples of Nell's story. Mr. Paula realizes that the extent of Nell's personal vocabulary is she can no longer treat Nell as incompetent or ignorant, as their first expression about the Nell's wild child. They changed their this interpretation of meaning as much as they encounter how much they did frequent visits to that particular grown-up girl, and they change their mind, they change their decision about their uh, about the behavior of the Nell, that she is no longer an abnormal and she is no longer a wild child. She can be cured, or there are some problems, and it was the result of his interaction with that girl. So how much we interact with the people, with the things are more clearer, and we give them more symbolically identification. We give them more better understanding to the things. But symbolic interaction is not just a means for intelligent expression, it is also the way we learn to interpret the world. A symbol is stimulus that has learned meaning and value for people. So what we can say, symbol, we can regard it as a stimulus, and it provides the base to understand the meaning or value for the people or the things regarding their interaction. So number three is thinking. What was the number one? Number one, there was meaning. Number two, there was language. Number three, there is a thinking, the process of taking the role of other. Bloomer's third principle is that an individual's interpretation of symbols is modified by his or her own thought process. When we interact with other people, there is a thinking process going on in our mind being as a human being. So we change, we alter our action, or there are some sort of modification or changes related to our interaction with other people, and that is based on our thought process. First we give meanings to our interaction, then we use language to give meanings to those interactions, then there is involve a thinking process or thought process. Symbolic interactions describe thinking as an inner conversation. So thinking, what we can say, the other name is inner conversation, or it's also called self-talk. We call this inner dialogue minding. So it's called inner conversation, it's also called minding, it's also called thought process. All these terms come under this third principle of thinking. So what is minding? Minding in an inner dialogue used to test alternatives, rehearse actions, and anticipate reactions before responding. Self-talk. Think about your own situation. Maybe you have an interview, or you have to go, you are doing preparation, so there is a thought process going on in your mind. What would be there, what would be the question, what would be, in what way, oh, if they will ask this question, oh, I didn't prepare this question, so I start preparing or checking the answer of that question. Or maybe they will see my personality, they will observe, examine my personality, so what sort of dress I would wear at the time of the interview before my interviewers. So these sorts of change of thinking process is continued in our mind, in human mind. So an inner dialogue is used to test alternatives. So we change, we rehearse, and we anticipate the reactions before responding. Self-talk, other people, what they will respond. We also believe that animals act instinctively or naturally without deliberation, without thinking. They are unable to think reflectively because, with few exceptions, they don't have thinking, or they don't have thinking capacity. So they are unable to communicate symbolically, because the relationship of symbolic communication is related to the human mind. The human animals comes with a brain that is wired for thought or thought process, but that alone is not sufficient for thinking. Interactionists maintain that humans require social stimulation and exposure to abstract symbol system to embark upon conceptual thought process that characterize our species. So language is the software that activates the mind, but it doesn't come pre-installed. So language is not pre-existed. When we interact with other people, it comes to we interact with other people on the base of stimulus, and we give them interpretation, we give them meanings. So just to be equipped with brain, it's not sufficient. There is a need, some sort of stimulation, some sort of provocation, or there must be some sort of what we say stimulus type things, and we have to act or we have to react. So that is possible in social settings. Without social settings, although we have a brain and equipped with this thinking process, but it's not sufficient. When we interact with other people, with other society members, then this process of thinking activates and start working in a proper way. So language is a software by which we interact with other people, and it's not pre-installed. It start working at the time of exposure, at the exact time when we need to perform this activity, when we need to interact with other people. Mead's greatest contribution to our understanding of the way we think is his notion that human beings have the unique capacity to take the role of others. Yes, animals cannot do this one. They act naturally, or that is fixed in their minds, and they do not act creatively by the different performing different activities that is beyond their role. But human being has a unique capacity to take the role of others. For example, early in life, kids role play the activities of their parents, talk with imaginary friends, and take constant delight in pretending to be someone else. Yes, you can remember uh, when some children are playing together, one teacher becomes teacher and the rest of the one child becomes teacher and the rest of the children become students. Or sometimes they are playing doctor patient, or there is a dialogue between them. If there are two children, they are one become patient and one become doctor, or teacher or student. Or sometimes one, if there are many children, one becomes the father, or there is the whole children pretends that they are children of and they have parents, and there is a dialogue between them. And what sort of dialogues they hear from their family members, they repeat the things almost in their activities. So they feel much pleasure when they are playing the role of others. When they are children, when they become father, parents, teacher, or patients or doctor, they feel a lot of pleasure. So it's a human capacity, or it's a unique capacity that is granted by Allah Almighty. It's related to the thinking process, related to the brain, activates this process. So, as adults, we continue to put ourselves in the place of others and act as they would act, although the process may be less conscious. Mead was convinced that the thinking is the mental conversation we hold with others. So maybe the children that they are playing roles, this is unconsciously, or this is not pre-planned, or this is not scheduled, but we convinced that the thinking is the mental conversation we hold with others. Being adult persons, we take the role of others deliberately or with conscious effort, always with an eye towards how they might see us and react to what we might do. In Harper Lee's novel To Kill a Mockingbird, Scott stands on the Boo Redley's porch and recalls her father's words: "You never really know a man until you stand in his shoes and walk around in them." So that's clear statement of what symbolic interactionism means by role taking. The young, impulsive girl takes the representative of a painfully shy, emotionally fragile man. Note that she doesn't become him, she doesn't become like her father, but it means when she will grow up and she will, I'm sorry, she will be, when she will be grow up, she will interact with other people, she will be more experienced, then she will be get the experience of her father. So, in this way, our father said that you never really know a man until you stand in his shoes and walk around. So, under the term of thinking, which was the third principle of the symbolic interaction theory, we were discussing about the minding and the self. That is also come under this heading, minding and what we say thinking process. So the self-reflection in a looking glass. Once we understand that meaning, language, and thinking are tightly interconnected, we are able to understand Mead's concept of the self. Mead discussed the idea that we could get glimpses of who we are through introspection. Introspection, what is introspection? We can define introspection in this way: the examination and observation of one's own mental and emotional process, his own thinking about himself or herself related to his mental and emotional process. Mead claimed that instead that we paint our self-portrait with brush strokes that come from taking the role of others, imagining how we look to another person. Interactionists call this mental image the looking glass self. The self or looking glass self, it insists that the socially constructed. When we interact with other people, we start thinking about other people, we start taking the role of others. What will other people be thinking about ourselves? What will other people be thinking about our dresses, our behavior, our personality? So we start thinking before interaction, or maybe at the time of interaction, what will be thinking about ourselves. what will be other people thinking about ourselves. We borrow the phrase from the sociologist Charles Cooley, who adopted it from a poem by I'm sorry, Ralph Waldo Emerson. Emerson wrote that each close companion or close friend is to his friend a looking glass. I was saying, yes, we can understand this term, very interesting. A looking glass, our friends are our looking glass, reflects his figure that does pass. So, what sort of thinking, what sort of views he or she gave us, that matters a lot. Our friends are our looking glass, or sometimes they say the things that are on genuine base. They want to modify our personality, and sometimes they advise us, sometimes they criticize us, and so they are our looking glass. In what way we can understand other people? The self-reflection in a looking glass, three-way mirror. So there is a lady, you can understand from the left side there is another lady who's very obese or fat lady, and she's thinking about her short skirt, and she says, oh, it might be time to start thinking about a little skirt, dear. I will also buy this little short skirt, like, yeah, because maybe it was a new fashion to wear small skirt, little skirt. So next there is a friend, or maybe there's a husband. Hi honey, how about one of those Brazilian thong deals? This is about the dresses deals, and think about those one. Maybe you can find another little skirt over there. And but about her daughter, oh, she's looking shockingly, and she's surprised to see her mom in little skirt. Mom, seriously, mom, who is going to be looking at you at this age in this dress? So these are the looking glass, our significant others, the people who have importance for us. They could be our siblings, they could be our neighbors, they could be our friends, they could be our relatives, close relatives. So these are the looking glass reflections, the self. Looking glass self, the mental self image that results from the taking the role of others, the objective self, me. So although it's a subjective self I and the objective self me, ob- subjective self I will do this one, I will wear this one, I'm doing that one. So it's related to subjective type. But when we take the role of others, it means we become objective self, me. Yes, the active agents are other people, and I becomes objective. I'm not subjective. Subjective are other people, are others, significant others. And I become me, or I become objective of other people, in what way they are interacting with me, with my behavior, with my personality, with my dress, or with my dealing with my other relevant things. So, stated more formally, the Beat-Cooley hypothesis claimed that individuals' self-conception result from assimilating the judgments of significant others that we have discussed in the self-looking glass mirror, three-way mirror. Symbolic interactions are convinced that the self is a function of language. Without talk, there will be no self-concept. We are not born with sense of self. Rather, self arises in the interaction with others. So I can only experience myself in relation to others. So absent interaction with others, I cannot be self. I cannot emerge as someone. So when I will interact with other people, I become self, or I become another or different entity, or different existence, or different human being, or different individuals. When there is no interaction, there is no concept of self. I'm just alone. The self that makes me different from other individuals, this is the concept of self. So conclude this symbolic interaction theory. George Herbert Mead in 20th century presented this theory, and he believed that development of the individual was a social process, as were the meanings individuals assigned to things. People changed based on their interactions with the objects, events, ideas, other people, and they assign meaning to things in order to decide how to act. Sometimes we have this looking glass mirror, our friends. Because of this looking glass mirror, we stop wearing our favorite shoes, we stop wearing our favorite dresses, we stop behaving something maybe that we like to behave, but we stop behaving in that way because our looking glass mirror doesn't like this. Our looking glass mirror or our friends or our significant others doesn't, they don't like the things. We have to change. We have changed as a result of interaction. Once or twice time we interact with other people, and we know, we give the interpretation, we give the meanings to that interaction, and there are some sort of changes. So this is end of our today's lecture.